Hey, it's Worth Playboy.
And my Playboys Bunny.
Welcome to our podcast where we discuss pickup, game, relationships, and...
Sex.
Do you have an introduction?
Sure.
Say it.
Okay, so Fort Worth and I were tagged in a question on Twitter, and it seemed like a relevant topic. He essentially asked how our dating, kind of run-up relationship advice applies to men who, whether it be a belief system or just a morality issue or whatever, they don't have sex before marriage. So can you still utilize our advice even if you are not a sex first relationship later guy?
Yeah.
And we believe that yes, in a lot of ways it's still applicable. There's just not sex involved.
Right. When it comes to game, the principles are universal.
Yeah.
The application is individual. So there's slight changes, and everybody has to tweak it for their own needs.
Yeah.
Everything, all the tactics and all the strategies like text less, you see her once a week, all of these things, or like even the dating system, how you meet people.
Yeah.
All of this works and applies.
Yeah.
It's all the way right up to sex. Then it stops wherever you and your girl decide that that's the best place to stop. You know what I mean?
Right.
Before sex. And what I've noticed and what we see from cultures that don't have sex before marriage, where like when I was talking to a gentleman in the Middle East, he said it's like 60-40, 60% are virgins, 40% are non-virgins. India, where it's a little bit more, Mormons, where it's more serious. They move from their courting or dating cycle is very short.
Yeah.
They don't do this.
There's a reason.
So they can get to sex.
Yeah.
And the other flip side is the longer you date, or let's say you have a couple, they meet, they're like, okay, this is a go. We're not going to have sex. We're going to have a engagement period of 6 months. Well, the chances of something going awry in 6 months is much higher than if you say 6 days or 6 weeks.
Sure.
I mean, even 6 weeks is pushing it.
Yeah.
Because of the tension and because of the stress. So you're going to have a smaller window from meet to sex. Does that make sense as far as courting? So it's just more structured. You're risking more, but there's more structure in the environment.
Right.
You've got grandparents, you've got parents, you've got social structure. So the things that, if you're doing what CHATEAU called endless dating.
Yeah.
That's what people do today.
Yeah.
Endless dating.
Yeah.
It's not natural, and it's very new. So that is taken out of the equation, the old school sex after marriage. So everything else stays the same. And again, game helps people stay together.
Yeah.
Dread and all these things that you learn in game and apply to girls because they find it exciting and fun, and it causes you to become more attractive to them. It still exists.
Yeah.
It all still matters. And it makes the marriage and everything else better. So that doesn't go away. It's just right up to the sex part, which is what keeps girls chasing,
Mm-hmm.
But you remove that, you have to put it into play pretty fast.
Yeah.
That's what we found.
Yeah, and I meant to preface this also with we are not the best, sources of information for non-sex before marriage relationships. However, we'll give you the best advice we have.
Exactly.
But there is a reason that the science shows that the fewer sexual partners there are before marriage, the more apt to success the marriage will have. It goes a long way just not to be kind of run through those cycles on and on and on. So there's a lot to be said for people who whether it be a morality issue, a religious issue, a family pressure, peer pressure, that you don't have sex before marriage. But oftentimes, those kinds of relationships, when you get married, you're I don't want to say friends. I want to say it's kind of like you're going into a partnership that develops into more. So you have a partnership, you have an agreement, you are married, and then you kind of fall in love, and you fall in mutual respect more, and the sex is introduced, so you have that lustful side, so then things develop. So it's just a little bit flipped from the way that we do it, but it works for the people who it works for.
Yeah. And one thing that I think a lot of people miss is the structure that's around them.
Yeah.
That holds it together. You don't get the structure. Let's say you grew up in Minnesota, you go to school in LA, and your first job is in Houston. You don't know anybody.
Yeah.
And now you're going to be celibate till you're married. There's no structure or support for that.
Yeah.
As opposed to if you're born, raised, you're now 17 or 18 at the age of consent, and you're introduced to a potential wife.
Yeah.
And 6 weeks later, you're married, and you're still in the same house.
Right.
That you grew up in. Now you just build a house on the same land. You're next door to your parents.
And you're both close to your family.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything is part of the fabric of the success of your marriage, and everything is working in your favor.
Yeah, you go to work with your dad. You go to work with her dad. I mean, it's a completely different structure holding things together.
Right. Right.
So
I think that our advice, short of the sexual stuff, and the sexual stuff will come in very handy after the marriage, because going into a marriage with a little bit of knowledge under your belt will, I think, solidify that marriage even more so. Because you don't have to learn everything the hard way. You can still utilize the tools of learning, even if you are celibate prior to the actual wedding.
And just as a sidebar, and I don't want to get too far off the subject, it's like I stumbled into Christian Wife Twitter one day, and the girls were talking about how this thing that they're told not to do, and it kind of gets spun that it's kind of dirty, don't do it, it's bad for you, all these horrible things happen.
Yeah, sex is bad.
And then the next day they're supposed to have sex.
Yeah.
And all that's supposed to go away.
And they're supposed to be comfortable being naked in front of another person.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be comfortable, giving themselves completely sexually to this other person. All of this stuff.
With no training.
And all this conditioning that it's
bad.
A dirty thing.
It's not just I showed up with no knowledge. I showed up thinking it was a bad idea.
Yeah.
That's a lot to put on a 20-year-old girl.
Right. Right.
And he's as clueless as she is.
So any kind of knowledge that you can bring to the table, be it game, dread, sexual performance kind of tips and tricks, all of this will just improve your marriage, whether you have sex before or after. Do you have sex before or after? I lost track of what I was actually saying.
No, that was one.
I was so mesmerized by your handsome face.
She just likes to say the word sex.
Sex.
Before or after.
Anyway, the description box is chock full of products and services from us that all apply to making sure that you are on track with your game, relationships, and sex. So check those out below, and we love to serve you. So we want you to win. If you like this, if this applies to you, if you've got relationships, or you've seen relationships that have gone to marriage that did not start with sex and have been winning, we love to hear those stories too. So we want you to win. Bye.